Hello again, it's Mark Glowacki, pledge class of 1976. Today on Briefs, I'd like to introduce you to Bob Fanning, a forward-thinking and interesting man. Bob has done a complete circle, starting as a small Indiana farmer to successful iBanker to gentleman farmer with fly fishing in between. Bob, welcome and thank you. Bob, what year did you join Acacia and why did you join?
Joined in 1962, pledged in, I spent just 2 years, so I pledged a year late. I joined it because one of the guys in a class invited me to come over, and I really liked the people. And during the, recruiting one time, I just wore some old clothes over to see if they really cared about me or not. I was that unsure, and everything was still the same, even though I was dressed pretty scruffy. And that sealed it for me. I thought these guys are okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. What did you enjoy about your 2 years that you lived there?
Oh, the camaraderie, it was just a breakout for me. Just, singing together, eating together, going places with guys to a bar or out for a soda. Mainly it was a bar in the latter years, but just enjoyed the relationships. It was just an eye opener for me to mix with the guys. A lot of them were kind of crazy, but anyway, it was enjoyable.
You know, you've had a great and interesting career that I'd like to ask a few more things about there. But what life lessons did living at Acacia kind of start you off with? Uh, what did you start to glean from your time there that for you forwarded on?
Really the relationships, and I saw the leadership in some of the people who were iron key. And I just came from a small farm, rural area, had not been exposed to any of that. And I think that was the life lesson I learned, how these guys were just normal, but yet could step into leadership roles and do things. I really enjoy. That was an eye opener for
Well, that's interesting. So you told me on the phone that you came from your family farm had like 140 acres. Is that what you
me. Yes,
told
it
me?
was a 140-acre farm.
And today your
It's
farm.
about 6,000 acres, all pretty much all irrigated, growing specialty crops from seed corn, seed soybeans, leasing ground, working with a potato grower. But it's just been, and I'm not a gentleman farmer, unfortunately. I'm actually involved hands-on in 9 full-time employees, and it's been a real learning experience. I came from investments, white shirts, pinstripe suits. You don't have to manage people. And I could actually use a full-time psychiatrist on staff to help me learn how to do this. And it's humbling. It's humbling, but wow, I do enjoy it. I mean, I do enjoy the experience, but I've been knocked around a bit in the second career, quite a learning curve.
Well, in our multiple times we've talked, I have found you to be a gentleman. So regardless of what your career has been, clearly you're a gentleman, and I'm sure people see that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is you had mentioned this second career at 60. Talk about that a little bit. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that are trying to figure out what to do with the second half of their life, if you will. What advice would you give them?
Basic, basically follow a passion. If you have an interest, if it's investments or trading or manufacturing a candy. I've got a friend that took a candy that used to be at Marshall Fields 40 years ago and reintroduced it. But it's just the fun of following a passion. And the goal maybe isn't even to make money, but just to follow that passion. And mine fortunately turned out to make a lot of money, and it wasn't my intention. It just happened.
And that was the move back into farming.
Yes, yes. And farming is a tough business, cyclical, but here there's a lot of specialty crops and the margins are much higher. And if you can manage the risk, it can be quite a good business. Much better than I ever dreamed it could be.
So when we talked a couple weeks ago, you had mentioned fly fishing with a spy from Russia. Um, tell
Well,
us tell us a little bit about that and your passion for fly fishing and where you've gone in Russia, and how long it took you to get there, et cetera. I just find that interesting. I'm sure
I really had an interest, always done it. Wish I'd started early. So at that time, and at 60 or 61, I really got serious about it. And I went to a fly fishing show in Chicago, met a guy. And so northern Quebec, brook trout, they're easy to catch. So I started out there in the Chateauguay River and then the Lviv River and then Arctic char. So I got some practice there. And then off to Argentina because I had booked. I met a guy that had detasseled seed corn, and he was a guide in Kamchatka in Russia. I never would have gone somewhere like that. And he says, Bob, you just got to see it once. And it truly was just. I went 5 times, and it's it's about like Alaska was 300 or 400 years ago, and Russia had their biggest military secret base, so people from the mainland couldn't even go to Kamchatka. And and I had to register with the Russian army. I didn't wonder why that was, but as I got there, it's just a dream. You land with a helicopter at a place, and you step out, and you have goosebumps because you know there might not have been another footprint there in 1,000 years. And the guy who ran the safari, I really liked him, Victor. And we would stop within the bus to get vegetables. And I mean, this is dirt, and the person doing it would run get the owner, and they would come wait on him. Oh, boy, that's quite something. And we one time, it's Far East Russia is little. You can get robbed there. You got to watch yourself. And we landed one place, and this constable came out, and all the native people were only about 4 feet tall that lived there. And I thought, man, we're going to get a shakedown. And Victor went into a little shed with him and came back out and motioned for us to go into town. We could buy some beer in town. So his son-in-law was along, and I got there and I said to his son-in-law, my gosh, Victor, he must have had to pay some money. And he said, no, he didn't. He was in charge of the KGB for all of Far East Russia. He says he just pulled out this medal and said, I trained the guys. Do you want to pursue it anymore? And I was so naive on those things, but the people around the fireside, there'd be about 10 of us. And on the fly-ins, there'd only be 4 of us, but they were just so interesting. And the Russians are so regular people in the Far East. They don't identify with Moscow or St. Petersburg, and they've been used to being left on their own. And you meet people there, some of the guys that are survivalists. I mean, if there was a nuclear war and everything wiped out, you'd want to go to have them take care of you. I mean, they could survive in the wild, and it is just untouched. It's the highest volcanic range in Asia. 14 are active, 6,000 feet up in snow, and about 200 rivers go in both directions. And it's just breathtaking to see something like that.
How long did it take you to get there?
Well, normally it would be a normal trip, but the airline, the Russian airline, will just stop service at any time. So the one year we finally said we're going, so we flew to Seoul, South Korea, then to Vladivostok, Russia, and then to Petropavlovsk, Kamchatka, and from there by helicopter in, because there's no road within 100 miles of where we are. It's beyond civilization. Anyway, 46 hours. I learned to brush my teeth in airports, and we counted distance by time zones. We didn't even look at distance. We just figured time zones. So you have to be dedicated to do a trip like that. And I would stay 2 weeks, but it was just absolutely a dream.
Interesting.
And the fishing with all the species, from king salmon, you didn't even mess with them. It was rainbow trout. It's where a rainbow trout originated. And you get one of those beautiful trout, they would weigh 5.5 pounds, many of the standard Kamchatka rainbows. And the sun would shine on them, and it was like 1,000 years of genetics unchanged. And it was just really breathtaking.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey, switching gears with you, that sounds really cool, especially since if you came from an iBanker background, you were used to having slumming it as at a Holiday Inn. This was a little different from the.
Yeah, what I learned, when the fishing goes up, the lodging goes down. And I mean, it's a direct relationship.
Interesting.
And
Uh,
you're used to taking a shower under a barrel somewhere. So
I wanted to ask you about Acacia. You had told me that you were there several years ago and was a little disappointed, I think, to be tactful. And then you went back for the 60s reunion. What did you see that had changed? And what was your reaction to that change?
it was one, I hadn't wanted to go back. I'd been there about 20 years ago in the house. The guys were just, it was not good at all. And the house was dirty and it was just terrible. And so I said, just walked away more or less.
Yeah.
And then I got a call from Steve Cutshall and then Tom Smith, and they harassed me. I didn't return calls a couple of times. And finally, okay, I'll come down and see you guys. Well, I got down there and it just, well, the house was still not in that good a shape. And I quickly, well, and then I met John Bering and Ernie, who was, he's the 21st century Woody. And I've got to tell you, I was so impressed by some of the students there and talking with them and what they had done. They had done something that was impossible because the facilities are not that nice. And I had worked with a military academy, Howe Military, and trying to turn that around. And it was 35,000 a year to send students there, but deferred maintenance, the barracks and the academic building should have been condemned. And I had cancer and was away, but there would be 35 or 40 families. We went out and got the best people you could ever get to come in and try to turn it around. But 35, 40 families would attend and one family would sign up, normally about 70%. It was that deferred maintenance. So when I went to Acacia and saw that older building and saw what they were doing, I could not believe it. I mean, seriously, it really got me. And they just had, I tipped my hat to them. I mean, it was an impossible job. I don't think I would have tried it, but they sure did. They got professional help on recruiting, and wow, what they've got now. And I could see the economics of it too, because they're right. They got the greatest location, and they're trying to get rid of most of the fraternities there and move them 3 miles out of town. Well, that's you got to commute, and the school was so much bigger. And so I see they're sitting on a gold mine. And they've got the idea on how to really recruit good people and build that. It's much different. They don't all eat together, different hours of classes, but that's still there. You can build that. And it's just outstanding what I saw. It just caught me off guard. And I went back again this year. And it's just really good to reconnect with some of the guys that I went to school with. I'm learning all kinds of new things now. And guys are pretty free to talk about their lives, and it's just very, very enjoyable.
What would you say? I guess this is my final question, but what would you say to guys of your era and alums in general about re-engaging with Acacia and helping in its journey to preeminence?
Well, I had not been, saw what was happening, and it's a very rewarding thing to get back in touch with people and help contribute in whatever way I can. And I can just see it's a legacy to go forward, what they can accomplish. They do need to improve the house. Right behind there's a new AGR house, and you see others down there. And others have disappeared. Fraternities have disappeared. And I think Acacia, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, was close to closing. But where they are and the approach that they're using, I just can't say enough what Ernie and John were doing. I mean, so hands-on. And it's basically a group of guys came back and said, we're going to save it. And they are doing that. So it was great when I was there in the 60s. It's had cycles, and that can be recreated. And getting involved is so important at this point because you can set it back on that for decades to go forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. People are working real hard at the journey. You were at Dean Cutler's talk, and I think that he espoused something that we've all been working for, and we appreciate your involvement and generosity. That's it for today. Bob, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to tell us a little bit about your story. Guys, you can always reach out to Bob. His email is going to be attached below. He'd love to hear from you, I'm sure, and love to correspond with all of you. Thank you very much. Bob, you have a nice afternoon. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks, Mark.